The leather office chair creaked as Ethan Cole leaned back, loosening his silk tie after another successful day at Thomas & Parker Marketing. The lakeside skyline stretched before him through floor-to-ceiling windows, buildings glowing amber in the setting sun. His corner office on the 38th floor was a testament to 15 years of relentless dedication, the same dedication he'd given to his marriage. His phone buzzed. Another message from Mia. "Working late. Don't wait up. Love you." The same words she'd been sending for weeks now, the same excuse that had begun to sound as hollow as their goodbye kisses. He stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the screen, remembering a time when "love you" meant something real. "Everything all right, Mr. Cole?" He looked up to find Natalie, his assistant of 8 years, standing in the doorway. Her coat was draped over her arm, reading glasses hanging from their chain around her neck. She had that knowing look she'd perfected over the years, the one that said she could see right through his forced smile. "Just fine, Natalie." He slipped his phone into his pocket. "Have a good evening." "You too, sir." She hesitated. "And Mr. Cole, whatever it is, you'll figure it out. You always do." After she left, Ethan pulled up his calendar, the nagging doubt in his gut demanding attention. He started counting. Mia had been working late, exactly 12 times in the past month. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore, just like the way she guarded her phone, the mysterious lunch meetings, and how she'd stopped wearing the diamond necklace he'd given her for their 10th anniversary. The drive home felt longer than usual, his thoughts circling like vultures. Traffic crawled along Bayshore Drive, giving him too much time to remember all the little changes. How Mia had started going to the gym more often, buying new clothes, spending extra time on her appearance. Changes that once might have seemed innocent, but now formed a pattern he couldn't unsee. 10 years of marriage. A decade of building a life together. Of trust and commitment. He'd given her everything. The lakefront house she'd always wanted. The interior design business she'd dreamed of starting. Unwavering support through every up and down. Or so he'd thought. When he pulled into their driveway, Mia's white Mercedes was already there. He checked his watch. 7:30 p.m., so much for working late. The house was quiet when he entered, but he heard the shower running upstairs. Their entrance hall still displayed the photos from happier times. Their wedding day, anniversaries, vacations. Ethan stopped before a picture from their trip to Porto and Cordova last year. Mia's smile had seemed so genuine then, her arms wrapped around his waist as they posed before the sunset. Had she been faithful then, or had the lies already begun? Mia's purse sat on the kitchen counter, her phone next to it. She'd been careful with that phone lately, never leaving it unattended. But now, as if fate had finally decided to show its hand, the screen lit up with a notification. Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the phone. In 10 years of marriage, he'd never checked her messages before. Trust had been their foundation, or so he believed. The doubt that had been eating at him for weeks finally overcame his principles. The notification preview showed enough. "Can't wait to see you again, baby. Last night was amazing. Same time next week." The sender's name made his blood run cold. Jason Harding. Ethan knew him. Everyone in their social circle knew Jason Harding. The arrogant real estate mogul who thought his wealth made him untouchable. The same Jason who was married to Mita, who had attended their dinner parties, who had looked Ethan in the eye and shaken his hand while secretly meeting with his wife. A memory surfaced, sharp as broken glass. Last month's charity dinner at the Avalon Hotel. Jason had been there with Mia. Mia wearing that new red dress she bought specially for the occasion. Ethan had noticed them talking, but hadn't thought anything of it. Now he remembered the subtle touches, the lingering glances, the way Mia had laughed at whatever Jason was saying. The shower stopped running upstairs. With precise movements, Ethan placed the phone back exactly as he'd found it and moved to the living room. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey from the crystal decanter, a wedding gift from Mia's parents. His hands were steady now, but inside, something had shattered. When Mia came downstairs, wrapped in her silk robe with wet hair clinging to her neck, she jumped slightly at seeing him. "Oh, you're home early." Ethan took a slow sip of whiskey, studying her over the rim of his glass. The woman before him looked the same as always, his beautiful wife of 10 years. But now he saw her differently. Every gesture, every expression, seemed calculated. "False." "Am I?" His voice remained casual, controlled. "Thought you were working late." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous tell he'd grown to recognize. The meeting finished earlier than expected. "Must have been some meeting," he said, his grip on the glass tightening imperceptibly. "Important client." "Just the usual end-of-quarter reports." She moved to the kitchen, keeping her back to him as she poured herself a glass of wine. The same wine Jason had sent over after their last dinner party. "How was your day?" "Enlightening." She turned, frowning slightly. "What do you mean?" "Nothing." He finished his whiskey and stood. "I'm going to take a shower." He climbed the stairs slowly, each step measured and deliberate. Their bedroom still smelled of her perfume. Channel No. 5, his Christmas gift to her last year. How many times had she worn it for Jason? The bathroom mirror reflected his face as he loosened his tie. He looked the same as he had this morning. But everything had changed. The man who'd left for work believing in his marriage was gone. In his place stood someone harder, colder, someone who would make them pay for every lie, every betrayal, every moment of mockery. Later that night, lying in bed beside her, Ethan listened to Mia's steady breathing. She fell asleep easily, peaceful in her deception. He stayed awake, plans forming in his mind. This wasn't going to be a simple confrontation. No, they deserved something more elaborate, something that would destroy not just their affair, but their entire world. His phone buzzed softly, an email notification. The Grayton Charity Gala invitation had arrived, requesting the pleasure of their company next week. Ethan smiled in the darkness. Sometimes the universe had a sense of irony. As Mia shifted in her sleep, turning away from him, Ethan made his decision. The gala would be perfect. Everyone who mattered in Lakeside would be there, watching as he revealed every dirty secret, every lie, every betrayal. But first, he needed an ally, someone who had as much to lose as he did, someone who would understand the need for revenge. He needed to talk to Danielle Harding. Over the next week, Ethan became a hunter stalking his prey. Each morning, he arrived at his office earlier than usual, using the quiet hours to build his case. His laptop became a repository of betrayal, a digital record of every lie, every secret meeting, every piece of evidence that would eventually bring their world crashing down. "Cancel my lunch meetings this week, Natalie," he instructed his assistant. "I have some personal matters to handle." Those personal matters involved careful surveillance. The first day, he followed Mia's Mercedes to the downtown business district. She parked near the Marina Hotel, a discreet but expensive establishment. 20 minutes later, Jason's black Range Rover pulled into the same garage. Ethan sat in his car, photographing them with a telephoto lens he purchased specifically for this purpose. 2 hours later, they emerged separately, but their flushed faces and Mia's slightly disheveled hair told the whole story. The next day, he hired a private investigator, not to gather evidence, but to compile background information on Jason Harding. The file arrived within hours, painting a picture of a man whose success was built on cutting corners and stepping on others. Jason had started in real estate during the 2008 financial crisis, buying up foreclosed properties at rock-bottom prices from desperate families. He'd turned those tragedies into a fortune, expanding into commercial real estate and development. Now he owned half a dozen high-rises in downtown Lakeside, each project surrounded by whispers of bribes and violated regulations. "Mr. Cole," his investigator's voice crackled over the phone. "There's something else you should know. Mr. Harding has a pattern. This isn't his first affair." Ethan's grip tightened on his phone. "Tell me everything." 3 years ago, he had an affair with his project manager's wife. When it came out, the manager was quietly transferred to their Bridgeton office. Last year, there was another incident with a client's wife. The client's business suddenly faced multiple code violations until they moved their contracts elsewhere. So he's a predator, Ethan said softly. A careful one. He picks married women, preferably from his social circle, makes them feel special, desired. Then, when it falls apart, he has enough dirt on everyone to ensure their silence. But Jason had made a mistake this time. He'd chosen the wrong man's wife. Ethan spent his lunch hours parked outside their usual meeting spots, the Maple District Bistro, where they shared intimate lunches in a private booth, the boutique hotel in the Emerald Coast, where they disappeared for hours. He photographed everything, noting times, dates, locations. The evidence mounted. Credit card statements showed matching charges at hotels and restaurants. Security footage from his office building caught them in the parking garage, stealing kisses like teenagers. Each piece of evidence was carefully cataloged, building an ironclad case of their betrayal. One afternoon, he spotted them at a sidewalk cafe. Maya threw her head back, laughing at something Jason said, her hand resting on his arm. The intimacy of the gesture made Ethan's stomach turn. He snapped several photos, adding them to his growing collection. That evening, Mia came home humming, a shopping bag from an expensive boutique swinging from her arm. "You're in a good mood," Ethan observed, watching her over his laptop screen. "Had a great meeting with a potential client." She kissed his cheek, and he forced himself not to recoil. They're interested in redesigning their entire corporate headquarters. More lies. He'd watched her spend 3 hours with Jason at that cafe. Not a client in sight. "That's wonderful, honey. Who's the client?" She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Oh, a new tech startup. Very promising." The lies came so easily to her now, he wondered if she even felt guilty anymore. Later that night, he reviewed his evidence. Photos, timestamps, credit card statements, hotel receipts, all meticulously organized. But it wasn't enough. Public humiliation required perfect timing, perfect execution. He needed someone who understood the stakes, someone with inside knowledge of Jason's world. He needed Danielle Harding. Finding her private number wasn't difficult. As the wife of a prominent real estate developer, she sat on multiple charity boards, a few calls to business contacts, a carefully worded request, and he had her direct line. Sitting in his home office, Ethan stared at the number on his screen. In the kitchen, he could hear Mia preparing dinner, probably texting Jason between chopping vegetables. The thought steeled his resolve. He pressed dial. The phone rang 3 times before a cultured voice answered. "This is Danielle Harding." "Mrs. Harding, this is Ethan Cole. We need to talk." "Ethan." Her voice carried a note of surprise. "What's this about?" "It's about our spouses. Could we meet somewhere private?" A long pause followed. He could almost hear her mind working, calculating possibilities and risks. Finally, she spoke, her voice careful and measured. "The Seabreeze Resort, 2 hours. I'll have a private room reserved." Perfect. The pieces were falling into place. The Seabreeze Resort's private dining room exuded old money, with its cream-colored walls and crystal chandeliers casting warm light over mahogany furniture. Danielle Harding sat at the corner table, her posture perfect in a black Chanel blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her expression was carved from marble, but her manicured fingers drummed softly against the white tablecloth, the only sign of tension. "This better be important," she said as Ethan sat down. "I don't appreciate cryptic phone calls." Ethan placed a manila envelope on the table between them. "Your husband is seeing my wife." Danielle's hand froze halfway to her water glass. Her blue eyes narrowed, searching his face for any sign of deception. "Excuse me? I have proof." He opened the envelope methodically, laying out photographs, text messages, hotel receipts. "They've been meeting for months, usually during late meetings or business lunches." She examined each piece of evidence with the precision of a jeweler appraising diamonds. The first photo showed Jason and Mia entering the Marina Hotel. The second caught them at the Maple District Bistro, heads close together. The third showed Jason kissing Mia in his car. It made Danielle's perfectly painted lips thin into a hard line. "That awful man," she whispered, her composure cracking slightly. Then, straightening her shoulders, "How long have you known?" "A week. I've been gathering evidence." Ethan leaned back, studying her reaction. "I assume this isn't the first time." Danielle laughed, but it held no humor. "Oh, Jason has a type. Married women, preferably from our social circle, makes them feel special, desired." She took a measured sip of water. "I've known about the others. Turned a blind eye for the sake of our position, our reputation. But this," she gestured at the photos, "this is different. Because it's personal. Because it's an opportunity." She met his gaze directly. "You didn't invite me here just to show me evidence. You have a plan." Ethan smiled coldly. "The Graydon Charity Gala is next week. Everyone who matters in Lakeside will be there, including our unfaithful spouses. Instead of confronting them now, giving them a chance to spin their lies, we make them watch their world burn." He pulled out the gala invitation. "We attend together. Let them see us. Let them wonder. Let them squirm. Then, when the moment is right, we expose everything." Danielle studied him for a long moment, her expression calculating. "You want to destroy them publicly. I want them to feel what we feel. The uncertainty, the fear, the knowledge that their whole world could collapse at any moment." He paused. "But I need someone who understands their world, someone who knows where to hit them where it hurts most." "Their reputations," Danielle said softly. "Their social standing. Everything they've built their lives around." A cold smile played on her lips. "Mr. Cole, I believe this is the beginning of a beautiful partnership." They spent the next hour planning, dissecting every detail. Danielle would arrive in Ethan's car, making their entrance impossible to ignore. They would coordinate their movements throughout the evening, always visible, always together. "Jason hates not being in control," Danielle explained, her voice rich with years of observation. "He'll start making mistakes, especially if he thinks I might know about the affair. And Mia can't stand being ignored," Ethan added. "Seeing us together will drive her crazy, but she won't be able to say anything without exposing herself. The beauty of it," Danielle mused, "is that they'll have to watch and wonder. Is it real? Do we know? Are we actually together, or is it all for show?" She raised her wine glass. "It's rather poetic, don't you think? Making them experience the same uncertainty they inflicted on us." Speaking of uncertainty, Ethan pulled out another envelope, this one thicker than the first. "I had these drawn up yesterday." Danielle opened it, her eyebrows rising slightly as she read. "Divorce papers. I believe in being thorough." "As do I." She reached into her designer handbag, producing her own envelope. "Already had my lawyers draft them. I was just waiting for the right moment." Their eyes met in perfect understanding. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about taking back control from those who had betrayed them. "To new beginnings," Danielle raised her glass. "And spectacular endings." Ethan clinked his glass against hers. They spent another hour refining their plan. Every detail had to be perfect. Their arrival time, their behavior, the gradual escalation that would drive Mia and Jason to distraction. "One last thing," Danielle said as they prepared to leave. "No backing out. Once we start this, we see it through to the end. Trust me." Ethan's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Backing out is the last thing on my mind." The week before the gala stretched like a wire-pulled taut, ready to snap. Ethan moved through his days with calculated precision, each moment bringing him closer to the night of reckoning. At home, he maintained his facade of ignorance, watching Maya's preparations with cold amusement. She bought a new dress for the gala, an elegant black number that cost more than most people's rent, probably purchased with the credit card he'd given her for their anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on him. "What do you think?" Maya asked, modeling the dress in their bedroom mirror. "Not too much." "It's perfect," he replied. And it was. Perfect for her public humiliation. "You'll be the center of attention." She beamed at his response, completely missing the dark promise in his words. "You're sweet. Oh, and don't forget to pick up your new tux from the tailor." Already done. He didn't mention that he'd chosen a different tux, one that would complement Mia's dress perfectly. They planned every detail, down to the color of his pocket square matching her jewelry. Throughout the week, Ethan and Danielle coordinated via secure emails, leaving nothing to chance. They met twice more, each time in different locations to avoid suspicion. The Sea Breeze Resort had been replaced by discreet coffee shops in neighborhoods where neither Mia nor Jason would think to look. "Jason's getting nervous," Danielle reported during their last meeting, stirring her espresso with precise movements. "He noticed I've been taking calls in private, started asking questions about my schedule." "Good." Ethan checked his phone, where a text from Mia claimed she was at a supplier meeting. His tracking app showed her at the Marina Hotel. Let him squirm. "I had my lawyers add something special to the divorce papers." Danielle's smile was razor sharp. "A clause about moral turpitude that'll cost him control of 3 of his biggest properties." "Thorough. I learned from the best." She leaned forward. "What about your preparations?" Ethan pulled out his phone, showing her the latest addition to their plan. "I hired someone to record everything at the gala. Multiple angles, professional quality. When this hits social media, there won't be a single society event in Lakeside they'll be welcome at again." 2 days before the gala, Mia grew clingy, almost desperate for his attention, as if she sensed something coming, some instinct warning her of the approaching storm. She suggested they have dinner together, cook at home like they used to. "I miss spending time with you," she said, chopping vegetables in their kitchen. "We've both been so busy lately." Ethan watched her hands move, remembering all the times they cooked together in happier days. "Yes, we have been busy, haven't we? All those late meetings, client dinners." She faltered for just a moment, the knife hesitating above the cutting board. "Well, that's business, isn't it? But this is us time." He smiled, knowing it would be one of their last meals together. "Of course. Us time." The night before the gala, Ethan reviewed everything one final time. The divorce papers waited in his safe, every page carefully prepared to strip Mia of everything she'd gained through their marriage. The evidence was organized chronologically. Photos, messages, hotel receipts, all ready to be displayed on the gala's massive screens. His phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. "Everything ready for tomorrow. All set. No turning back now." "Good. They won't know what hit them." Ethan stood at their bedroom window, looking out over the lakeside skyline. Behind him, Maya slept peacefully, unaware that this would be their last night as husband and wife. Tomorrow, her comfortable world would shatter like fine crystal dropped on marble floors. He thought about their marriage vows, about promises of faithfulness and honor. She'd made those promises while looking into his eyes, her voice steady, her smile bright. All lies. Tomorrow, she'd learn the price of betrayal. His phone buzzed one last time. Danielle again. "Sweet dreams. Tomorrow, we take back everything they stole from us." Ethan smiled into the darkness. Tomorrow, Lakeside's elite would witness a scandal they'd never forget. Tomorrow, Mia and Jason would learn that their clever little affair had been the biggest mistake of their lives. But tonight was for savoring the anticipation, for knowing that in less than 24 hours, justice would be served cold, calculated, and without mercy. The Grayton Charity Gala transformed the crystal ballroom of the Avalon Hotel into a glittering spectacle of wealth and power, crystal chandeliers casting golden light over Lakeside's elite as they paraded in their finest. The air was thick with expensive perfume and whispered gossip. Ethan watched through the tinted windows of his Mercedes as the valet helped Danielle out. She was stunning in a deep blue designer gown that whispered money and power, diamonds glinting at her throat and ears. Their entrance had been timed perfectly, fashionably late enough to ensure all eyes would be on them. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. Danielle's red lips curved into a predatory smile. "Born ready. Let's give them a show they'll never forget." Through the grand doors, they could already see Mia and Jason inside. They were standing near the bar, champagne flutes in hand, looking perfectly at ease in their betrayal. Mia wore the new black dress, while Jason sported a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Remember," Danielle whispered, her grip tightening on Ethan's arm. "Let them come to us. The more we ignore them, the faster they'll crack." They made their entrance with calculated grace. The effect was immediate. Conversation stuttered to a halt as heads turned, whispers rippling through the crowd like wind through tall grass. "Is that Ethan Cole with Danielle Harding? But aren't they? Oh my goodness. Look at Mia's face." Ethan caught the exact moment Mia saw them. The color drained from her cheeks, her champagne flute freezing halfway to her lips. Beside her, Jason's confident smirk faltered, his knuckles whitening around his glass. Mr. Cole, Richard Graydon, their host, approached with an outstretched hand. "And Mrs. Harding, what an unexpected pleasure to see you together." "Richard," Ethan smiled warmly, shaking his hand. "Danielle and I have been working closely on some exciting new ventures." "Very exciting," Danielle added, her voice carrying just far enough to reach Mia and Jason. "Ethan has been absolutely instrumental in helping me explore new opportunities." The innuendo wasn't lost on anyone, least of all their spouses. From the corner of his eye, Ethan saw Mia set her glass down with shaking hands. "Darling," Danielle touched his arm, the gesture intimate and deliberate. "Shall we get some champagne?" They moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting greetings and making small talk while steadfastly ignoring their spouses. Every touch, every laugh, every whispered conversation was choreographed for maximum impact. "They're watching us," Danielle murmured behind her champagne glass. "Jason looks like he's about to burst a blood vessel." "Good." Ethan placed his hand on the small of her back, leading her toward the dance floor. "Let's give them something else to watch." The orchestra was playing a slow waltz. Ethan pulled Danielle close, their bodies moving together with practiced ease. They'd rehearsed this, knowing every eye in the room would be on them. "Mia is about to have a meltdown," Danielle observed, her lips curved in amusement. "She's changed colors 3 times in the last minute. Jason's not doing much better. Look at how he's grinding his teeth." They continued their dance, every movement designed to torture their watching spouses. Ethan's hand traced patterns on Danielle's back. She laughed at something he whispered in her ear. To anyone watching, they looked like two people in the throes of a new romance. Finally, Mia cracked. She moved toward them with determined steps, her face a mask of forced politeness. "Ethan," her voice was tight, controlled. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" He turned to her slowly, as if just noticing her presence. "Mia, you look tense. Is everything all right?" "Please." She glanced at Danielle, then back to him. "Just for a minute." Ethan pretended to consider it, his hand still resting possessively on Danielle's waist. "Actually, I promised Danielle the next dance. Perhaps later." "This is important." Mia's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "More important than my date." He raised an eyebrow. "That would be rather rude of me, wouldn't it?" Mia's composure slipped for just a moment, raw panic flashing across her face. "What are you doing?" she hissed, dropping all pretense. "Dancing," he replied simply, "with a beautiful woman. Is there something wrong with that?" The orchestra shifted to another slow dance as Mia stood there, her composure crumbling by the second. Around them, other guests pretended not to watch, while hanging on every word. "Ethan, please." Mia's voice dropped, a desperate edge to it. "What's going on between you and Danielle?" He turned to Danielle with a soft smile. What do you think, darling? Should we tell her what's going on? Danielle traced a finger down his lapel. I think some things are better left to the imagination, don't you? You're right, as always. He turned back to Mia. I'm sure you understand. After all, you're quite good at keeping secrets yourself, aren't you? The color drained from Mia's face. What's that supposed to mean? Oh, nothing specific. Ethan's voice was casual, but his eyes were cold. Just that everyone has their little secrets, don't they, sweetheart? Before Maya could respond, Jason appeared at her side, his confident swagger gone, replaced by barely contained rage. Enough games, Cole. What the heck do you think you're doing? Jason, Danielle's voice dripped with false sweetness. How nice of you to join us. We were just discussing secrets. You must have some fascinating insights on that topic. Danielle. Jason started, but she cut him off. No, really, darling, tell us all about it. About all those late meetings, those business dinners, those special clients. Her smile was sharp as a blade. You always did have such interesting stories. More guests gathered nearby, drawn by the mounting tension. Whispers circulated through the crowd like electricity. This isn't the place, Jason growled, his fists clenching. No, Ethan raised an eyebrow. I thought you loved an audience, Jason. You certainly seemed to enjoy showing off at the Avalon Hotel last month. Though I suppose you thought no one was watching then. Jason's face went from red to white in an instant. You mean? Ethan's smile never wavered. I'm just making conversation, unless there's something specific you'd like to discuss. Mia grabbed Ethan's arm. Stop it. Whatever you think you know. Think. He looked down at her hand until she released him. I don't think, Mia. I know. Every detail, every meeting, every lie. You're making a scene, she hissed. Am I? I thought I was just enjoying the party with my date. He turned to Danielle. Another dance. Love to. She stepped closer to him, making sure Jason got a good view of her hand sliding up Ethan's chest. Although I was thinking we might want to get some air on the terrace later. It's such a lovely night for stargazing. Jason's jaw clenched so hard they could hear his teeth grinding. Mia, we're leaving. Now. She laughed, the sound like crystal breaking. Oh, darling, you stopped having any say in what I do the moment you decided to sleep with my friend's wife. The words hit like a thunderclap. Nearby conversation stopped dead. Someone gasped. Mia swayed on her feet, grabbing a passing waiter's tray for support. You don't know what you're talking about, Jason snarled, but his voice shook. No. Danielle's smile widened. The Marina Hotel, the Maple District Bistro, that charming little spot in the Emerald Coast. Shall I continue? I have dates, times, receipts. You're drunk, he tried, but the panic in his eyes was unmistakable. Hardly. She turned to Ethan. Darling, wasn't it the 14th when they spent 3 hours in that private booth at Maison Laurent? Or was it the 15th? The 14th, Ethan confirmed, his voice cold and precise. The same day, Mia told me she was working late on the Peterson account. Funny coincidence, that. Mia made a small, broken sound. Ethan, I can explain. Can you? He turned to her, and for the first time let her see the full force of his anger. Can you explain why you broke every vow we made? Why you looked me in the eye and lied day after day? Why you let this worthless person get close to you? Don't talk about him like that. The words burst from her before she could stop them. The silence that followed deafening. Well, Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. At least now we know where your loyalties lie. Jason stepped forward, trying to salvage some control of the situation. You think you're so clever, don't you, Cole? Playing these games, making these accusations. Games? Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about games, Jason. Like the game where you sleep with other men's wives. Or the one where you pretend to be a respectable businessman while destroying families. Watch your mouth, Jason warned, his face darkening. Or what? Ethan's tone was mocking. You'll try to ruin me, like you did Richard Martins when your affair with his wife came out. Or Thomas Quinn, when you couldn't keep your hands off his wife. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping. You're a predator, Jason. A pathetic little man who thrives on taking what belongs to others. I said watch your mouth. Jason's control snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing Ethan's lapel. The room erupted in gasps and exclamations, but Ethan didn't move, didn't even flinch. He just smiled, cold and deadly. Go ahead, he said softly. Show everyone exactly who you are. Jason's grip on Ethan's lapel tightened, his knuckles white with rage. The crowd around them drew back, forming a circle of shocked faces and whispered commentary. You think you can come in here? Jason snarled. Spread your lies. Try to ruin my reputation. Your reputation? Ethan's laugh was icy. The only person who ruined your reputation is you. I'm just making sure everyone knows exactly who Jason Harding really is. You don't know anything about me. I know everything. Ethan didn't move to break free, his calm only infuriating Jason further. Every questionable deal, every affair, every time you destroyed lives for your own pleasure. Tell me, does it make you feel powerful, taking other men's wives and ruining families? Jason, stop. Mia's voice cracked with panic. Please, you're making it worse. Shut it. Jason snapped at her, and in that moment of distraction, Ethan moved with lightning speed. He grabbed Jason's wrist and twisted, forcing the bigger man to release his grip. Jason stumbled back, his face contorting with rage. Don't you ever, Ethan's voice was lethal, tell my wife to be quiet. Your wife? Jason sneered, recovering his balance. The same wife who's been in my bed for months. The one who begs for me, who can't get enough. Ethan's fist connected with Jason's jaw before he could finish. The crack of impact echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Jason reeled backward, blood trickling from his split lip. For a moment, complete silence fell over the room. Then Jason touched his bleeding mouth, looked at his red-stained fingers, and lunged with a roar of rage. His wild swing caught Ethan's shoulder, but Ethan had been ready. He stepped into the punch, using Jason's momentum against him to drive his fist into the man's ribs. The sound of cracking bone was viscerally satisfying. Ethan, stop. Mia screamed, but her voice seemed very far away. Jason tried to grapple, but his technique was sloppy, all fury and no finesse. Ethan slipped under his guard and delivered a brutal uppercut that snapped Jason's head back. Security, someone shouted. Somebody call security. But no one moved to intervene. The crowd watched, horrified and fascinated, as Lakeside's top real estate mogul was systematically demolished by the man he betrayed. Jason swung again, desperation making him clumsy. Ethan blocked the punch and countered with a devastating blow to his solar plexus. As Jason doubled over, gasping for air, Ethan grabbed his hair and drove his knee into the man's face. Blood sprayed across the marble floor. Jason went down hard, his nose clearly broken. Get up, Ethan commanded, his voice eerily calm. Show everyone how tough you are, Jason. Show them what a big man you are. Jason tried to rise, blood streaming down his face, but Ethan's foot caught him in the ribs, sending him sprawling again. What's wrong? Ethan circled him like a predator. Not so confident without your lies to hide behind. You're insane, Jason choked out, spitting blood. No. Ethan crouched beside him, his voice pitched low. I'm just better than you, at everything, including this. He punctuated the words with another punch that left Jason curled on the floor, moaning. Ethan, please. Mia grabbed his arm. You'll hurt him terribly. He shook her off with enough force to send her stumbling. Don't touch me. Listen to your wife, Cole. Jason managed through bloody teeth, or what's left of her. That taunt was a mistake. Ethan's next punch knocked out 2 of Jason's teeth. Finally, hotel security burst through the crowd. Two burly men in black suits moved to restrain Ethan, but he stepped back on his own, straightening his jacket with precise movements. "No need, gentlemen," his voice was perfectly controlled again. "I believe Mr. Harding and I have finished our discussion." Danielle, who had watched the entire scene with cold satisfaction, stepped forward. "Actually, darling, I believe we have one more item on tonight's agenda." She nodded toward the ballroom's massive screens, normally used for charity auction displays. Ethan smiled, reaching for his phone. "You're right, of course." He pressed a button, and the screens flickered to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe it's time for a toast." The ballroom screens came alive with images, each more damning than the last. Jason and Mia entering hotels, secret meetings caught on security cameras, screenshots of text messages, hotel receipts, every piece of evidence meticulously documented, displayed in high definition for Lakeside's elite to see. Ethan grabbed a fresh champagne flute from a passing waiter, his composure perfect despite the violence moments before. Not a hair was out of place, not a wrinkle on his tuxedo. The same couldn't be said for Jason, who was still bleeding on the marble floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan's voice carried clearly through the stunned silence, "I'd like to propose a toast." "Ethan, don't." Mia's makeup was streaked with tears, her perfect facade finally cracking. "Please, we can talk about this privately." "Privately?" He turned to her, eyes cold. "Like how you and Jason kept your affair private. How you snuck around behind our backs, thinking you were so clever, so discreet." The screen shifted to show more evidence: intimate text messages, hotel booking confirmations, security footage, timestamps. Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Several guests pulled out their phones, recording everything. "Ethan," Mia sobbed, "I can explain." "Explain." His laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Explain how you broke every vow we made. How you looked me in the eye and lied day after day." "No, Mia, you don't get to explain." He nodded to Danielle, who produced an envelope from her clutch. "In fact," she said, her voice carrying clearly, "I don't think either of you will be doing much explaining anymore." She walked to where Jason was struggling to sit up, security guards hovering uncertainly nearby. With deliberate movements, she opened the envelope and let the papers flutter down around him. "Divorce papers, darling. Plus evidence of your multiple affairs, questionable business dealings, and tax irregularities. I'm sure the authorities will find it fascinating reading." "You can't." Jason sputtered through his bloody mouth. "I already have." She smiled, cold and triumphant. "You taught me well, remember. Always keep leverage on everyone. I learned from the best." Ethan pulled out his own envelope, thick with legal documents. "And Mia, these are for you." He tossed the papers at her feet. She stared at them, her face ashen. "No," she whispered. "Yes." He raised his glass. "So let's toast my dear wife and our friend Jason. To their secrets and lies, to their arrogance in thinking they'd never be caught. To karma," Danielle added, raising her own glass with elegant precision. Mia crumpled to the floor, sobbing openly now. Jason tried to stand but couldn't manage it, his injuries and humiliation leaving him broken on the marble. "You've ruined everything," Mia choked out. "No, sweetheart." Ethan's voice was ice. "You did that all on your own. I just made sure everyone knows exactly who you are." He turned to address the shocked crowd. "And speaking of everyone knowing, the evidence you've seen tonight has already been sent to every major news outlet in Lakeside. I'm sure tomorrow's headlines will be fascinating reading." "You scoundrel," Jason growled from the floor. "That's rich coming from you." Ethan smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "How's your face feeling, by the way? I hope I didn't damage anything permanently, though I suppose your modeling career was never going to take off anyway." Danielle stepped over her husband's prone form like he was nothing more than a minor obstacle. "I think it's time we made our exit, darling. The air in here has become rather stale." "Couldn't agree more." Ethan offered her his arm. Though one last thing. He walked to where Mia knelt among the scattered divorce papers. Crouching down, he spoke softly, but his words carried in the silent room. Remember how you said you could explain? He waited until she looked up at him, mascara streaking her cheeks. Don't bother. There's nothing you could say that would make me forgive you. Nothing that would make this okay. You're invisible to me now, Mia. From this moment on, you don't exist. Standing, he straightened his cuffs and returned to Danielle. Together, they walked toward the exit, the crowd parting before them like the Red Sea. Behind them, they left destruction. Mia sobbing on the floor, Jason bleeding and humiliated, their reputations and social standing, their carefully constructed lies, shattered beyond repair. And Ethan. He felt nothing but satisfaction. Justice had been served cold and merciless, exactly as planned. The morning sun painted lakeside skyline in shades of gold, but the headlines painted it in scandal. Ethan sat in his new penthouse apartment, sipping coffee and reading the Lakeside Tribune's front page. Real estate mogul's secret exposed. Shocking gala confrontation rocks city elite. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Texts, calls, emails. Everyone wanted his side of the story. He ignored them all, enjoying the quiet satisfaction of victory. A knock at his door broke the morning silence. Through the security camera, he saw Mia standing in the hallway, looking nothing like the polished society wife she'd once been. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her designer clothes wrinkled as if she'd slept in them. "Go away, Mia," he called through the intercom. "Please," her voice cracked. "Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You had 10 years. You wasted them. Ethan, I love you." He cut off the intercom. Through the camera, he watched her slide down the wall, sobbing. Let her cry. Her tears meant nothing to him now. His phone buzzed again. Danielle this time. "Have you seen the news?" she asked when he picked up. Hard to miss. He took another sip of coffee. "How's Jason handling his newfound fame?" "Poorly." Her laugh was rich with satisfaction. "The SEC launched an investigation this morning. Turns out our evidence of his creative accounting practices caught their attention. 3 of his biggest projects are now under scrutiny." What a shame. Indeed. And that's not all. 2 more wives have come forward with similar stories. Seems Jason's predatory pattern is finally catching up to him. Ethan smiled. "How's the divorce proceeding?" "My lawyers are circling like sharks. With a morality clause in our prenup and evidence of his affairs, I'll take him for everything he's worth." She paused. "Speaking of which, have you heard from Mia? She's currently crying outside my door." "How pathetic." Danielle's voice dripped contempt. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. She doesn't exist anymore, remember?" Another knock at his door interrupted them. His building security team. "Mr. Cole, your wife is causing a scene in the hallway. Would you like us to remove her?" "Ex-wife," Ethan corrected coldly. "And yes, please remove her. She's not welcome here." Through the camera, he watched them approach Mia. "Mrs. Cole, you need to leave," the security guard said firmly. "No, please." Mia struggled to her feet. "Ethan, just let me explain. Please." "Ma'am," the guard said gently, "don't make this harder than it needs to be." "You don't understand," she sobbed. "He's my husband." "Not anymore," Ethan said through the intercom. "The divorce papers were served last night, remember? Now get out of my building before I have you arrested for trespassing." The next week unfolded like a slow-motion car crash for Mia and Jason. Ethan watched it all from a comfortable distance, each new development confirming that his revenge had exceeded even his expectations. His phone rang. Natalie, his assistant. "Mr. Cole, Mia's on line 3. Again. That's her 7th call today. Keep blocking her." He turned to his office window, watching a storm roll in over the lake. "Any other news?" "Yes, sir. The Lakeside Business Journal wants your comment on Jason Harding's company stock, dropping 60% since Monday." He smiled. "Tell them no comment. Though you might mention that karma's a fascinating thing. One more thing. Natalie hesitated. Mr. Thomas wants to see you about making you managing partner. Really? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Interesting timing. He said, and I quote, anyone who can orchestrate that level of strategic takedown belongs in our leadership. A knock on his office door interrupted them. Richard Graydon stood there, looking uncomfortable in his $1,000 suit. Ethan, do you have a minute? Of course, Richard. He ended the call with Natalie and gestured to a chair. What brings Lakeside's premier developer to my humble office? Richard shifted nervously. It's about Jason. He's trying to salvage what's left of his business. He asked me to talk to you. Did he? Ethan's voice turned frigid. And why would I be interested in anything Jason has to say? Look, what he did was wrong, unforgivable, even. But his company employs hundreds of people, innocent people who might lose everything. Like how he made other people lose everything. Ethan leaned forward. Tell me, Richard, did he send you to plead for Thomas Quinn when Jason ruined his business? Or for Richard Martinez when he destroyed his marriage and career? That was different. No, it wasn't. Ethan stood, towering over him. Jason made his choices. Now he gets to live with the consequences. He smiled sharply. And speaking of consequences, I heard the SEC is very interested in some of your joint ventures with him. You might want to get your lawyers ready. Richard paled. Are you threatening me? Not at all. Just offering friendly advice between colleagues. Ethan glanced at his watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with my divorce attorney. The law offices of Jensen and Partners occupied the top floor of a Lincoln Avenue high-rise. Patricia Jensen, Lakeside's most feared divorce attorney, greeted Ethan with the smile of a shark scenting blood. The papers are ready, she said, pulling out a thick file. Your wife, excuse me, soon-to-be ex-wife, won't know what hit her. Has she hired representation? Tried to. But after that gala video went viral, most top firms won't touch her, afraid of antagonizing my connections. Patricia's smile widened. She's working with some strip mall lawyer from Naperville. Perfect. Ethan reviewed the documents. What about the house? You'll keep it. The prenup is ironclad, and with proof of her infidelity, she violates the morality clause. She gets nothing except what she brought into the marriage. Good. He signed where indicated. Make sure she's served at her office. Maximum embarrassment. His phone buzzed. A text from Danielle. Turn on Channel 5 News. Now. He grabbed the remote from Patricia's desk, switching on the wall-mounted TV. Jason's bruised face filled the screen, standing outside his office building while reporters shouted questions. Mr. Harding, is it true the SEC is investigating your company? What about the allegations of systematic fraud? Have more women come forward about affairs? Jason looked nothing like the confident mogul he'd once been. His designer suit hung loose, his face still showing traces of Ethan's beating. I have no comment at this time, he stammered. My attorneys will. Mr. Harding. Another reporter pushed forward. Sources say your biggest investors are pulling out. Is your company facing bankruptcy? The fear that flashed across Jason's face was answer enough. Ethan watched with satisfaction as the man who'd thought himself untouchable crumbled on live television. His phone buzzed again. Danielle. Beautiful, isn't it? Watching him fall apart. Very. How are the divorce proceedings going? Wonderfully. My lawyers found offshore accounts he thought he'd hidden. I'm taking everything. Ethan was about to reply when Patricia interrupted. There's something else you should see. She handed him her tablet, showing a social media post from Mia. I know I made terrible mistakes. I've betrayed the best man I've ever known. Ethan, if you're reading this, please, I'm begging for a chance to explain, to make things right. I'll do anything. Pathetic. Ethan muttered, handing back the tablet. Make sure the post is included in the divorce filing. Shows she's admitting to the affair publicly. Already done. Patricia gathered the papers. You know, in 20 years of handling divorces, I've never seen a more thorough destruction of someone's life. It's almost beautiful. Almost. Ethan stood, straightening his tie. It's a masterpiece. A month after the gala, Lakeside's winter settled in, coating the city in pristine white that matched the coldness in Ethan's heart. He stood in his new penthouse, watching snowflakes dance past floor-to-ceiling windows while reading the latest news on his tablet. Harding Properties, highly is for the NHK, UPTCY. SEC investigation expands. More charges expected. Society SCANDAL LEDs to ANV Istor Exodius. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Cole, Maya's mother is here to see you. He sighed. Send her in. Eleanor Williams entered, looking every bit the society matron in her Chanel suit and pearls. But her usual imperious expression had been replaced by desperation. Ethan, please. She didn't wait for an invitation to sit. You have to stop this. Stop what? Ethan asked coldly. The consequences of your daughter's actions. She's destroyed, Ethan. Her business is failing. No one will work with her. She had to move back home because she can't afford an apartment. She cries herself to sleep every night. How tragic. His voice could have frozen rivers. Tell me, did she cry herself to sleep while she was seeing Jason Harding? Or did she sleep just fine after lying to my face? She made a terrible mistake. No, Ethan cut her off. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. What she did was a choice, multiple choices, made day after day, for months. But you loved her aunts. And she killed that love. He stood, towering over her. Now, unless you want your family's financial dealings scrutinized as closely as Jason's, I suggest you leave. Now. After she left, his phone rang. Danielle, you'll never believe who just tried to approach me at the spa, she said without preamble. Jason's mother. Ethan laughed. Let me guess. Begging for mercy. Claimed he's having a breakdown. Apparently he's been drinking heavily, rambling about revenge. She thinks he might do something desperate. Let him try. Ethan's voice hardened. I'd love an excuse for round 2. That won't be necessary. The FBI just raided his offices. Seems all that evidence we gathered led them to a massive fraud scheme. He'll be lucky to stay out of prison. Later that afternoon, Ethan's lawyer called with updates on the divorce proceedings. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Maya would be left with nothing. No alimony, no property, not even her wedding rings. As he hung up, his office door burst open. Jason stumbled in, drunk and disheveled, his once immaculate appearance now a wreck. You scoundrel. He slurred, swaying on his feet. You've ruined everything. Ethan didn't even stand. Security will be here in 30 seconds. Make them count. My company, my reputation, everything I built. You did that yourself. Ethan's voice was ice. Every time you chose to sleep with another man's wife. Every time you destroyed someone else's life for your own pleasure. I just made sure everyone saw you for what you really are. I'll end you. Jason lunged forward, but security caught him before he made it 2 steps. You hear me? I'll. Get him out of here, Ethan ordered. And make sure he's charged with trespassing and threatening bodily harm. As they dragged Jason away, his threats echoing down the hallway, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text, a video link from one of his contacts. Mia, being served with the final divorce papers in front of her failing design studio. The footage showed her crumpling to the ground, sobbing as curious onlookers filmed with their phones. More social media fodder, more public humiliation. Perfect. That evening, he met Danielle for drinks at the Grandview Hotel's rooftop bar. She looked triumphant, radiating the satisfaction of a predator after a successful hunt. The divorce is final, she announced, raising her martini. I got everything. The houses, the cars, even his art collection. His lawyers folded like cheap suits once I threatened to expose more of his affairs. Congratulations. Ethan clinked his glass against hers. To freedom and justice. She smiled. You know, I almost feel sorry for them. Almost. Don't. They made their choices. Speaking of choices, she set down her glass. I'm moving to New York, taking over the East Coast operations of his company. Well, my company now. Good for you. You could come with me. She touched his hand. We work well together. Ethan withdrew his hand gently. We worked well for revenge. But that's done now. She nodded, unsurprised. No regrets. None. He looked out over the city lights. They thought they could play their little games, keep their secrets. They never saw the storm coming. And now, they've lost everything. Everything, she agreed softly, just like they deserved. 3 months after the gala, Lakeside's social landscape had shifted dramatically. Ethan sat in his new corner office at Thomas & Parker, now as managing partner, reading the latest headlines on his tablet. Harding indicted on federal fraud charges. Former mogul faces 20 years. Additional allegations surface. His phone buzzed. Danielle. Have you seen the news? They're leading him out in handcuffs. It's beautiful. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, Ethan replied. Thought you'd appreciate that. By the way, heard anything from Mia recently? Not since the divorce was finalized. Last I heard, she's working as a junior designer at some suburban firm. Quite a fall from her lakeside studio. Karma's rough. Danielle chuckled. Settling in well in New York. The view from Jason's former office is spectacular. Ethan smiled. The man who'd once boasted of his untouchable position now faced prison with nothing left to his name. A notification popped up on Ethan's tablet, an email from his lawyer. The house had sold well above asking price, the last physical tie to his life with Mia gone. He'd donated all her remaining belongings to charity, erasing every trace of her from his life. He stood in his penthouse, poured a glass of Macallan 25. The same scotch he'd once saved for his and Mia's anniversary. Now he'd drink it to mark a different kind of milestone. The liquid glowed amber under the lights. He moved to the window, looking out over Lakeside. Behind him, the silence was peaceful, final. He raised the glass to his reflection. In the darkened glass, he saw not just himself, but the man he'd become, stronger, colder, completely free of the weakness of forgiveness. To karma, he said softly. To justice. To the perfect revenge. He sipped the scotch, savoring its rich complexity. Like revenge, it had taken time to mature. But the wait had made it all the sweeter. His phone buzzed one final time. A news alert. Jason's bail had been denied. He would await trial in federal custody. The lawyer's arguments about flight risk were deemed valid, given Jason's dwindling resources and multiple offshore accounts. Ethan smiled, remembering Jason's face that night at the gala, bleeding and broken on the marble floor. The physical beating had been satisfying, but this complete destruction of everything the man had built was infinitely better. Taking another sip, he watched the snow fall, content in the knowledge that he'd orchestrated the perfect revenge. No forgiveness, no mercy. Just pure, cold justice, served exactly as he'd planned. Now that, he said to the empty room, is a toast worth remembering. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.